Hello guys, welcome back to Tabletop Republic's YouTube channel. My name is Seb.k and I am back with another review. This time it's going to be a first impressions video for Svalarheima. See, I knew I'd do that straight away. Svalarheima Winter Force for Panoceania. I'm never going to get that name right, so I'm going to try to avoid saying it for the rest of this review. But what we're going to do is do what we did last time. We're going to go through all the profiles from start to finish. Just so I can give you my thoughts on what I think about each one, where I think they fit in the faction, and then we'll do a follow-up video like we did with Yu Jing, just going through how I build lists around them and what strategy I think they use on the table. But we're going to start with Bulleteer. I've got it set up so that we're going by unit name here because I just find that easier, especially when I'm building lists, when I know the names of the units to find them. So if you want to follow along with this, just set your name settings here to unit name as over publishing order. So we're going to start with the Bulleteer Armbot. Bulleteers are amazing. Everybody who knows about Panoceania knows just how ridiculous this unit is. The only thing I can compare it to with how cheap it is and how versatile it is the Rui Shi. But this thing can actually be better because of the ODD. It's putting negative mods on your opponent, which is always amazing. And of course, you can still give it assisted fire. So it's hitting on 15s, which is really, really good, obviously. And it's extremely cheap. But also, the heavy shotgun version is very, very good. The only problem is that ODD is brilliant when you're stacking that range mod with the existing ODD mod and then perhaps a cover mod. But when you're in shotgun range, or where you want to be 8 inches away, you're probably putting them at a +3 for range of their weapons. So the effectiveness of the ODD isn't quite as good, but it's still really good. For 17 points, having a heavy shotgun that's that fast moving across the table is great, but they're not that specific to this faction, so we'll move on. Boig Soldiers. So this is the big Silhouette 5 elephant in the room. Everyone was excited to see what a Silhouette 5 Panoceanian unit would look like, and it does look great. I quite like the model quite a lot, but unfortunately it's a bit meh in my opinion. Only it's hard because if you compare this to other units, and it's difficult not to compare it to other units and other factions, even though Panoceania doesn't have anything like this natively, it's still hard not to compare it to the Yanhuo in Yu Jing or other Silhouette 5 heavy infantry, which are all over the game now, and it just seems a little bit bare bones for its points cost. So if we go through what it actually has, ballistic skill 14 is great. It's pretty standard for Pano actually, but for most factions that would be amazing. Silhouette 5, obviously, armor value 5, which is great in cover, but there are other things in this faction that have decent armor values, not too dissimilar to this, so it's not that standout in terms of how tough it is. BTS 6, of course, is very tough, but with its weapons, you know, if they're going to end up hacking it, or I suppose it's useful for obviously defending against breaker ammunition, but most of the time it's hacking you're going to worry about with that high BTS, and with the range bands it's going to sit out with a missile launcher. It's not going to come up as much as you'd think. Physique 13 is fine because it's not going to be doing close combat. I mean, it's all right at it and has a shock CCW, but you know, I think that's more of a fluffy sort of thing than it is something you'd reliably use on the table. Then we have a look at its abilities. Full auto level 1 is great. You know, it's +1 burst, especially on the missile launcher, which is brilliant. To burst 2 missile launchers, great. The problem is there's a couple of other really good ones in this faction that are the same points cost or cheaper. Especially in SWC with this 2 SWC here for that. And then you've got the Mark 12, which is the burst 4, damage 15 gun because of that full auto. With a decent range band, Spitfire range band, it's alright, you know. There's just so many good guns, loads of HMGs and stuff all over the place in this faction, with negative mods and all kinds of stuff. I'm still not sure. Yeah, I'm still not sure why you take this guy. I think he would be a lot better if it was full auto level 2. Which would fit quite well because, as you'll see as we go through this, the faction has a lot of really good units with negative mods put on your opponent, mimetism and ODD and stuff. And that would kind of fit with that. And for that points cost, I think people would pay that just to have that negative mod, and that'd be a pretty good ARO piece. But as it stands, it's an alright ARO piece. with ballistic skill 14 and armor 5 and 2 wounds and that sort of thing. But there are other things that can do that. So it's one of those things that you'll take because you really like the model, but you're probably better off taking one of these other linkable options, as we'll go through in a minute, which is a shame because I think it's brilliant, and it's a shame that we've got a Silhouette 5 heavy infantry in Pano now that's not, super exciting, but there you go. Clippers, missile launch is fine. It's weird that it doesn't have the normal missile launcher option. It's only the smart missile launcher option. There's some ways to do the guided trick in this faction. There's a few forward observers, infiltrators, that sort of thing. There aren't any drop troops in this faction, which I just thought I'd mention. There's not a lot of infiltration or superior infiltration. There's only, I think there's a couple, maybe one infiltration option as we'll go through. So getting the forward observer trick off and then combining it with this may be quite difficult. But it's there, and everyone has one of similar stats, so there you go. Fugazi's brilliant. The only thing I'm going to say about these is AVA3, because we all know what these flash pulse bots do and how annoying they are and how good they are for orders. But AVA3 is brilliant. That gives you an extra 3 orders, which this faction, and when we do our other video, tends to sit around 13 to 14 orders if you want, or you can easily play limited assertion at 10, but if you want to go for 13 to 14 orders, you can do it with this quite cheaply, 8 points a model, and 3 of them, so that's really good. Fusiliers, this is where most of your order bulking up is going to be. They have so many great linkable options, and they're just so good as a standard line infantry with that basic 10 points cost. And then that makes all of their weapons cheaper, even though they've got ballistic skill 15. So you've got HMGs at 18 points, missile launchers at 15 points, which is just brilliant. Especially with that ballistic skill bonus that you're going to get out of the fire team. That's 15. Ballistic skill 15 on the missile launcher burst 2 is brilliant. Multi-sniper, which is great, of course. And all your basic hacking and so on options. To be honest, these guys really shine when you look at their fire team core potential. You've got Orc Troopers that can link up with them. The Infirmary, which is the Super Doctor, which is brilliant if you put an Orc Trooper in there, as I will talk about here and probably more in the next video. But if you put an Orc Trooper in the link, and then you've got this Doctor, an actual Doctor with higher than Whip 12 and Pano standing behind it to keep it alive, is pretty good. So we'll talk about that in a minute. There's a lot more options here, but we'll do that in the next video, and we'll talk about that properly. Flight Officer Agnes, this is more of a fluffy inclusion. I'm not sure. She's all right. I don't know if you're going to spend 16 points just to get a specialist when you've got all of the Fusilier options that could just, basic paramedic specialist, whatever. But for the extra 4 points, you've got submachine gun, nanopulsar, 6th sense, but she's linkable, so you're probably going to get a 6th sense bonus anyway. And the specialist operative. So he's more of a fluffy inclusion than it is. She doesn't even shoot. BTS 6 is so strange on this model. I think, again, it's more of a fluffy inclusion than it is a serious one. She's not. If she was a wild card, she would be amazing. But she's not a wild card. It would be a way of getting cheaper links. And as it stands, as just a Fusilier, I'm not sure that works. There's also something else that I want to bring up, which is I'm not entirely sure, and I haven't really researched this, but when a model counts as something else, in this case she counts as a Fusilier, I'm not sure she gets the fire team core skill. And why you would want that? Well, you would have her then giving you the ability as a Fusilier to form a fire team core around it using wildcards and Orc troops and things like that. But I'm not sure you're allowed to do that because she doesn't have Fireteam Core anywhere on her profile. And I do believe that they FAQ'd it so that if you try and build a Fireteam Core around a model, they must have the skill themselves. So just counting as a Fusilier basically means she can only be added to a Fusilier Core, which is, as far as I know, that's how I understand that it works. So I'm pretty sure she's not the best. But, it's a fluff thing, and models, okay. So, there you go. Right, Hospitallers. So, it's really interesting to have a faction that has both Orcs and Hospitallers in it, because on the face of it, Hospitallers are just better. They're just so much better, and it's hard not to look at all the weapon options that they have. The only thing they're missing is a missile launcher, but of course, Hospitallers and Knights of Justice that we'll talk about can fill in that option quite nicely for a similar points cost, which basically means that these guys in most situations may form a better link team if you're not going for the full 5-man. I'm not saying they make Orcs useless, of course not, because they're going in Fusilier Corps and things like that, and then they have their own place. But if you're just looking for the heavy infantry with amazing stat lines, this is the way to go, especially seeing as they're all cheaper, because Frenzy, for some reason, makes things cheaper. If they're linked, they're not going to be Frenzy anyway. So you're getting the points discount without having the problem of them being frenzied, which means that you end up with an HMG for 10, almost 10. I think it's 5 points less than the Orc HMG, but with the same ballistic skill, the same armor value, higher willpower, higher physique. I think they're +1 physique over the Orcs, and they're better CC, of course, the DACCW, martial arts. I mean, the whole works. These guys are really, really good, and you can have if you end up with a whole core, you could end up with a whole stealthed core, or with martial arts level 2, and it's pretty disgusting. I think these guys are brilliant. All of their options are great. The fact that you can get an Infirmera in there, but it's just a little weird that you've got. I'm not sure what's going on with this, because if you had the Harrys, you would have a Doctor at whip 13 already, because the Harry's profile has a Doctor in it. So why would you want to then add a Infirmera to that Harry's link, which would give you 2 Doctors? It seems like a bit of overkill there, but it does make that Harry's team cheaper. So it's a little goofy, but it is a thing that you can do. The fact that they have a decent cheap for this stat line, boarding shotgun profile, is amazing. Multi-rifle profile is great if they're the backup link filler, because don't forget, you can throw in, you can put in this Doctor here, throw in one of these guys, and then use one of the wild cards or whatever, and have a really solid 3-man Harry's team moving up the table. So these guys are really, really good. And they might only get beaten out by the fact that you haven't got the points to have all of this crazy heavy infantry. You might have an Orc trooper doing your defensive job, and then you might have something with negative mods, like a NIS shooting with an HMG instead of one of these. But if you just want a really tough, high ballistic skill HMG, these guys are the ones to do it with. And they're just really good. They're just really good in every way. The Jotun is a horrible, horrible tag. Not in a bad way, actually. I didn't mean to say it that way. Really, what I mean to say is this thing's really horrible. And if you've actually tried to deal with one of these, it can change the face of the game the moment they put one down. Your strategy goes out the window, because you simply have to kill it. Armor 10 in cover, it's armor 13. Your average gun can't hurt it. Not that you probably would want to shoot combi rifles at it anyway, but just think about this for a minute. If they do try to use missile launchers on it, it's making saves at trying to beat 5s, because armor 10, damage 15, or 14 if they're using blast mode. It's very hard to deal with, even with multiple save making weapons. The only way to really crack it is with breaker style weapons. Obviously AP works very well against it, but if you're using AP and it's in cover, it's still going to be armor 8, because that will halve and then get +3. So it's really, really difficult to deal with. As I said, it changes the face of the game with them just putting it down. Obviously, it's incredible. Ballistic skill 15 multi-HMG with flamers and DPs, and it's just got all kinds of silly stuff. It's crushing. It's absolutely crushing. Tags obviously have their own weaknesses. They've had buffs. They've got 3 orders now with tactical awareness, but obviously they're vulnerable to hacking and so on and so forth. But you can actually protect this guy quite well. You've got decent hacking options in this faction for counter hacking and things like that. So you could feasibly run this, and no one would think that you're being strange for putting one of these horrible things down on the table. If not just to see the look on someone's face when this is your held back model, it's always hilarious. It's a brilliant tag, and fits very well with this faction. They can do limited insertion very well, so you can, and they've got good engineer options and so on and so forth. So it's a solid option. The Karu is a new unit, one of the first of the new units. And these guys are brilliant. All of their new units are very good, as you'll see in a minute. I think these guys are great. I'm still working on my proper breakdown and list building video, so I'll have a lot more thoughts to share about those when I do that video. But for the time being, you just have to look at the profiles to see how absolutely insane this is. The combination of reducing your opponent's negative mods and then imposing a negative mod with a mimetism is just so good. It's so good with their complement of weapons as well. And it's so cheap. I know it's an Armor 1 model, but this is so cheap, especially with the Climbing Plus. The fact that they can get angles with these great weapons, multi-rifle Blitzen, anti-personnel mines, multi-rifle EMERAT. That's a horrible weapon. It's a large template EM weapon, which makes them really, really good to drag up the field. For 25 points, you can drag up the field with a Knight of Justice or something, which has the fire team. Well, these guys have fire team Joe skill, and the Knight of Justice is the wild card that links up with that. So that's brilliant to get this EMERAT some use, because it is fantastic. And the double fallback, I can't wait to see what this model looks like. I think it's really hilarious. I'm not sure whether you'd take it over the other fallback in this army, which is the Orc fallback, and obviously it's linkable, so it can easily get the burst bonus that this gets for having two of them. But I think it's hilarious, especially if you're not running that model. It's less SWC as well. I believe the Orc fallback is 2 and this is 1.5. It's also 42 points, I think, for the Orc fallback. Obviously, the Orc is way tougher than this guy. But with the Climbing Plus, you could just sort of put that sitting there in the first turn, not really doing anything, being your turn 2 and 3, either horrible ARO piece or just to pop up, catch them at an angle they didn't expect and start hitting them with really dangerous stuff. I mean, fallbacks are a great gun. And with brilliant range bands, really good damage. So this is a really horrible, nasty piece to put on the table, and I can see it not being picked only because there's other good gun options in this faction. But if you don't and you want to try it out, makes total sense. I think it's hilarious. I mean, it's a little bit expensive for what it is, but the fun factor is huge. And I can't wait to see what a normal size Silhouette 2 guy looks like with two fallbacks. I believe in our left, Chusa has to kneel down just to hold this thing, so I'm interested to see what that looks like. The Karu Engineer is another brilliant option, another engineer option. There's lots of them, although he is whip 12. I think there might be a better engineer somewhere, but if there isn't, that's still fine. But I think there's a cheap engineer. There's several. There's two new options, I believe, for engineer in this faction still to come. So we'll maybe skip this one. And the paramedic, again, it's great. It's got a good assortment of weapons already, and then it's a specialist that can get most places with the Climbing Plus. So depending on what you want to do with your list, this may be a thing you do as well. The paramedics are not bad in this faction because a lot of the heavy models you want to pick up have physique like 13 or 14, which means that the roll you're going to make with this paramedic is going to be an 11 or a 10, which is not amazing, but it's still re-rollable with a command token, of course. And the fact that Pano generally have whip 12 anyway, rolling an 11, I mean, is it really that much difference? So paramedics are still very good. And I may include a couple of those when we do the list video, so we'll have to wait and see for that one. How did I move forward? Did I miss one? I always miss one. How did I end up missing one? So we've done hospitals, infirmaries, right? So we've got infirmaries of St. Lazarus. So infirmaries are a brand new sort of doctor unit. They're partially a knight, but without the 2 wounds that you normally get that comes with a knight. But they're a doctor at whip 13, which is the best doctor in Pano already, which is brilliant. Of course, I mean, they're a bit expensive, but considering where they're going to go and the fact that they're linkable with a few other options, attacking links are great. Putting them on with a Knight of Justice is really, really good. You can actually build a fairly decent attacking link around a core of Fusiliers. I don't like to usually move 5 models up the table, but you could feasibly move 3 models up the table using a 3-man core. One of them being an orc with some horrible gun, and then the infirmer around to keep him alive, and then the Fusilier being something useful like a hacker or something else that can to do something else mission wise. Could be a thing that you could run. Being able to keep the Knight of Justice alive is brilliant. Moving, of course, then that's a specialist that's moving up. Also, if you team up one of these with the Knight of Justice, then you've got two really good close combat models. So you can move them both into CC. This one would get the +1 burst bonus if you want to use that monofilament. And then if you just want to hit them really hard, you use the Knight of Justice instead and use the DA from that. So I think that's not a bad combination. The only time it's a bit weird is, as I mentioned earlier, is when you Harry's them up with the Hospitalis, because, you know, the Harry's profile is already a doctor. But other than that, I think these guys are really solid. Just in those two situations, they're probably going to get used the most. Just to keeping that Orc foil back with Fusiliers alive, I think is what's going to happen most. But as I said, with the Knight of Justice, that could be something that's really nasty aggressively as well. So, miss the Infirmaries. Yes, Uma Sorensen. I sort of naturally skipped over this profile. Uma gets a lot of flack, and for fairly decent reason. None of her profiles really impress that much when you look at other stuff, both in Pano as a whole or in any of the factions that she's in. She's another lieutenant option, but, you know, Uma is fairly... She's not super tough, because one wound armor 3 is tougher than your standard person, but not tough enough to be considered a hard to kill lieutenant. She's still fairly easy to kill, even with the mimetism / camouflage. The camouflage one is odd, because I don't believe there's any other camouflage in the faction. So if you put the token down, probably going to know it's Uma, or they're going to be scratching their head because they'll be thinking, you can't possibly have taken Uma. So that's a bit of a weird one. And then, of course, she's not got full deployment, so her longest range gun for killing anything is the Breaker Combi Rifle. So camo in your deployment zone with a short or medium range gun, and then two machine guns, which is even shorter range gun. Still not entirely sure what you'd take this top one for, to be honest. And then you've got the normal one, which is the linkable option, and that's the only time you're ever going to really see her, is the fact that she's a wild card, because as a wild card, there are some situations you get into with list building in this faction where you just need an extra member, and you don't want to take one of the native members. And by that I mean you've got, you know, a Harry's of Nisses or a Core of Nisses or something, and you're missing something, right? Maybe a range band or whatever. Even then, you can usually cover it for cheaper than the cost of this model. But, you know, the cool thing is that in a link team, 2 submachine guns is burst 5, which is great. I don't know if you'll ever get burst 5 with a 5-man core BS16 sort of thing. It's probably not worth it, because you've got HMGs and things for that. So again, it's still not good enough to make me take her. Really not sure why you would. I think there's other breaker combis in this faction. She just doesn't bring anything special to the table. So unfortunately, she probably won't get a lot of use. But there you go. So back on track with the profiles now. We've got Knight of Justice. Knight of Justice is amazingly good. A lot of people are saying that she's it's kind of, you know, a Joan replacement. I mean, it's not at all. Not even a little bit. Joan is better in every way, I think. There are probably a couple of stats that people could cite and say, well, this guy's better. I think the BTS 9 is better. Things like that. But really, Joan's reason for being is that inspiring leadership, and there's nothing here. Oh, and the fact that she's got no wound in cap, which basically makes her a 3-wing model. So there's nothing here that makes me compare them to Joan in any way. They're basically Father Knights, and they're good Father Knights. And especially with a native fire team duo here, where you've got a lot of things that are wildcard that could just slot into a duo with these guys. Mostly the Infirmary, though. I like that quite a lot as an idea of moving those two up the table, because you can do objectives with them and things like that. But yeah, other than that, you've got the missile launcher, which is great because it's linkable. Because it's a wild card, one of these can be in any team, so you can put those with some Fusiliers, have the Infirmary back it up to keep it alive. That's a really solid ARO piece, armor 8 in cover with that armor 5 plus 3. Then you've got Spitfire, which is your attacking option. Again, really good. I prefer the Spitfire version, I think. If I'm doing ARO duty, I'm probably taking the Orc foil back for that. Just because I like the versatility of foil backs, and in the link team, you know, burst 2 explosive is hilarious. But if you want burst 2 explosive templates, you can take that one. But the Spitfire is the attacking option, and it's just brilliant. Of course it is. It's ballistic skill 14. These things are really good in close combat. with Phys 14 and CC 23 and martial arts and all the good stuff. So yeah, the assault hacker is good. It's a bit expensive though. If this was a multi rifle, not a combi rifle, I would consider it, because then it would have a whole bunch of attacking potential and different things. And if you wanted to put a longer range gun in your link, you could then do that. But as it stands, just the combi rifle with the assault hacking device, I'm not liking it. There are other assault hacking devices in the faction. There might be lower whip, but they're still more going to get, I think you're going to get more use for the points cost than this one at 51 points. The Knight of Justice Forward Observer. Again, that's okay. I still think it's a bit expensive though, and if with the weapons, the things that it's bringing, I think there were probably other reasons to other models to take that would do that job a little bit more efficiently and cost effectively than that. So ignore that. And of course, the Knight of Justice Lieutenant. This is a problem though, because this faction doesn't have chain of command. So if you do take this one, maybe problem is the moment you spend that order, the whole point of giving it, the lieutenant status is to get the extra order, and I just don't think it's too many eggs in one basket. I think it's going to be an obvious lieutenant the moment you spend it. If you spend it early, they'll know who it is, and they're not invulnerable. They're good, but they're not invulnerable. Nothing is in Infinity, and if you don't spend that order early, then why did you make it the lieutenant? If you wait till the last turn, then you haven't really got the benefit out of it, and it's obviously not done a lot of work. So probably stay away from this lieutenant. I think this faction's probably going to end up with a fairly boring lieutenant, or a trickier, lieutenant, as we'll see later on. Right, Indigo Spec Ops. Oh, right, there we go. So that was the one that... Hang on. Where am I? It's so easy to get lost, isn't it? Karu, Jotems. Ninjas. Right, so the ninja. Yeah, so if you guys saw my Yujing rundown of White Banner, how I think that these guys aren't that useful. I don't want to talk too much about it right now, but it's obviously really expensive. They're both really expensive profiles for not doing a lot that much better than what you already have. Obviously, it's the only way to get a TO camo hidden deployment model. There is no hidden deployment in this faction, I don't think, other than this model. So if you do want that surprise aero piece, brilliant. But as I've stated before, if you do bring this guy out and he's sniping something with ballistic skill 11, well, yeah, it's a surprise, but you're probably going to miss. And then they can use whatever they want to go and eliminate this model, and it's 37 points. And the shot marksman rifle is a little bit better because it has the forward deployment, so it can catch people at some strange angles. And it's got the TO camo, surprise attack, and all that good stuff. But it's still going to be a bit iffy with that ballistic skill 11. I mean, he might be a surprise, but then, if you miss, and shot marksman rifles aren't the most potent weapons, and they're not useful against a lot of stuff these days, because a lot of things have shock immunity, so a lot of the good things that you might want to kill probably won't die in one hit from this thing. And then you're probably plinking off armor, and it's just, I really don't like this unit at all. And it's a shame, because I think, well, if it still had the close combat ability, or at least they all had forward deployment 2 or something, then I'd be like, oh, okay. But as it is, yeah, it's good in close combat, but shock CCW is only good against certain things, and comparing it to the standard ninja, there is just no contest really. So let's go on to the next one. The Yankai is great. He's really, really good. The only problem is he didn't have any smoke, but for the points cost, you get all of this stuff. He makes him a really, really good attacking model. And if you're playing a mission where you don't want to take more specialists, because you may take a Noken over him if you want a specialist, just because of the usefulness of that. But other than that, I mean, this guy's stat line is just wild. He's basically Miyamoto Musashi for people who don't get him. He's actually slightly better because he's got mimetism, so he's actually harder to hit than Miyamoto is. And I believe Miyamoto doesn't have Kinematica, which bumps this guy to dodging 16, which I actually used him the other day in 012, and he's annoying. He's really good. Super jump obviously means that he can stay and hide anywhere and then attack from any angle. Which it's really hard to map out the path of a model that's got super jump if you're trying to defend against it. And he's a model that defends midfield really well. With the forward deployment 1, you can move up with a coordinated order with something else. And then he's sitting in the midfield again as like Miyamoto. He's a model that they can't ignore because he becomes incredibly good late game for just eliminating anything. He is the best anti-tag weapon that's not a hacking device as well, because, you know, martial arts 4, CC23 with explosive, it's so much. Yes, he's only Phys 13, but it's crazy. It's still enough to wipe most things out in the game off the board. And of course he crits on high numbers, rolling 2 dice if you want, with the versatility of different martial arts levels too. Yeah, he's just brilliant. And he's almost cheap enough to be a cheerleader. It's just incredible in almost every way. So there you go. Locusts. So locusts are a bit strange. They're one of those profiles where they've almost been overbalanced. Every time you see something you like about them, you see something that you don't like about them, and you're like, well, that could be better. Or, you know, I would like them to lose X to gain Y. So as I go through this, you'll see what I mean. So ODD straight away is brilliant. Okay, so I'm not saying that these guys aren't worth taking. They definitely are, because ODD on anything is great, especially models that have, you know, a decent-ish ballistic skill. 12 is a bit low for Pano, but a decent-ish ballistic skill, but with weapons like breaker combi rifles or whatever, they can solve problems that other units in your army can't solve. So definitely consider them. I'm just saying that you've got 2 options here. The first 2 options, which I really like, not as the non-specialist attacking options. The boarding shotgun is good too, but that's different. You know, it's good in a completely different way. So these first 2 profiles, if you look at them, you're like, yes, they're good at everything. They can shoot a bit. They can, you know, they've got negative mods, and they've got close combat weapons in the CC20, which is fine. And then you realise that. Shock CCW, okay, great. It's good against standard line troops. But with Phys 12, the best that you're going to put your opponent at is basically a 50-50 armor save. You know, they're probably going to have armor 1 or 2, which will mean that they're beating 10 or 11, which is a 50-50 basically. And it's not super reliable. So they can do close combat, just not as well as other things. Can you see what I mean here? We've got DA CCW on this one. Again, same thing, but then Phys 12. And CC20, yes, they can't miss, but it's not as guaranteed as an actual close combat troop. So, you know, and you do pay quite a lot of points for these guys. The infiltration is brilliant. But again, you got infiltration, but you're not hidden. So you could infiltrate it out there, but then it's going to be out there on its own. And ODD or not, a model that's infiltrated in the middle of the table on its own, completely visible, is often a free 30 plus points to your opponent. They're going to find something they can do to deal with it and just and kill it fairly easily. So then you end up with a situation where you don't deploy it infiltration style into the middle of the table. You bring it back a little bit, maybe deploy it near a Noken or something else to keep it alive, and then you've not really used that infiltration skill. So can you see what I mean by there being something good and then you realizing that on the table it's not as good as it looks? It doesn't mean they're not good. I'm just saying, you know, they're not the best unit in the game, despite the fact that they, you know, their stats can be quite enticing. The boarding shotgun, grenades, drop bears is cool. And if you're running a couple of these guys and you are infiltrating them together, they can maybe defend themselves a bit. Maybe this one or the submachine gun, which we'll talk about in a minute, is really good. But yeah, but I still like this guy's complement of things. But again, grenades, Phys 12. So if you do feel like throwing them over walls, you're going to be doing that on a +3 to the Phys 12, maybe for range. So that's 15, -6 for the spec fire. You're going to be doing it on 9s. It's not super reliable. Same with drop bears. They can throw them, but the best you're going to get is 8 inches on a 15. 15's good, but, you know, anyone who knows what it's like to have to make a roll like that will know that you'd still rather a higher number than 15, even with that. So it's still a bunch of stuff, and this one could be really annoying, this boarding shotgun profile, just because you can put the drop bears down and stuff. So it's not a write-off. Just with 30 points, it's not the cheapest, but with all the stuff, it all comes together to make a fairly decent package. So I wouldn't think badly of you if you took that one as well. So the assault hacking device is probably your best assault hacking device, but the problem is you're not going to be surprising them with it because, again, ODD, not TO camo, so they're not hidden. So they will know where it is, and it will be open information, that assault hacking device, as far as I know. So yeah, they're going to be able to sort of work their way around it, but it is your best assault hacking option at whip 13. And 38 points, it's fine, especially with all the other stuff that he's got. The breaker combi, the shock, the ability in CC, potential to kill smaller units and other midfield units. So yeah, it's good. It's also, I forgot to mention that all of these profiles are fantastic enemy camo hunters, or not sort of camo hunters, but hunting other people's infiltration units. These guys aren't that bad at it, so that could be a reason you take them. This is strange. The shock marksman rifle, and the reason why I call it that is because marksmanship level 1 gives you shock. So it's a shock marksman rifle for 0 SWC, but 33 points. If you're going to take one, well, I mean, I almost recommended the Ninja then, and then thought twice about it, because I should never recommend that unit. This is better than the Ninja, if that's the weapon that you wanted to take. It's better at shooting, and it does have the infiltration. No, it's not hidden. So it can catch the angles. And it will win most firefights with that ODD. And the marksmanship does let it sit at a range band, as long as you're good with range bands. You can put them at another -3, which might give you a -12 overall. So that is pretty good. It's a little bit expensive, and there are other models in this faction that have guns that can do a similar job in negative mods and things. And I'm still not sure about this one, but yeah, it's all right. This submachine gun decharges while parrot is brilliant. It's still a little. I mean, the infiltration ODD combo is great, and the thing about submachine guns is they're only good at up to 8, so it's good and it is cheaper, but you're kind of losing a bit of the advantage of ODD if you're using the submachine gun a lot. But wild parrots are fantastic, so I will talk about some stuff to do with strategies with those when we do the list building video in a minute. But for now, this is a decent option. And I just wish this one was like a forward observer or something, because then it would just be incredible, but then it would kind of make Noken look a bit silly. Because it would be a similar points value, so I can understand why it isn't. Oh, also, this is your close range guy. He has the DA as well, so it's a good combination of close range stuff. He's kind of the shorter range version of the 33-point breaker combi profile. Just with the wild parrot, which is brilliant. The killer hacking device as well, there aren't many of them in this faction, so he's probably your best killer hacking device at whip 13. So again, that's another decent hacking option. And if you do want to run hacking defense or a hacking heavy list, maybe with the Evo to do coordinated hacks, then you might take a couple of these. They're expensive, but if that's what you want to build your strategy around, then that's how you do it. This is your best killer hacking device for that. So there you go. Machinist. So normal machinist is what you'd expect, standard for Pano, whip 12, engineer. But this second profile that they've got is quite cool. Building links around this can be a little tricky and ends up being expensive. And I know why that is. It's because they didn't want them to be like, whatchamacallit, the other faction everybody hates from Pano, that for some reason has just gone out of my head. You all know what I mean. The one with the linkable Kamau sniper. I don't know why I can't remember it right now, but you all know what I mean. So the NIST fire team is very expensive, and it's not as cheap, and it's easy to get the horrible options that other faction gets with the Kamau sniper. But this is one of your ways to make it cheaper, and he combos really, really well with the fact that there are great remotes in this faction, and you may either have taken the Jotun, or you've got Bulleteers, and you've got the Peacemakers. They're all viable options that you should probably take in a lot of cases, and then you've got an engineer here who can pick them up and is movable up the table. I mean, the best time that I see to use this is in a Harry's of Nisses. Again, I'll probably have that a lot in my list building video. But for now, yeah, it's cool. Also, the fact that he now gains mimetism, which actually makes him, I mean, he reminds me a lot of Scarface Cordelia. Yeah, Cordelia is an engineer, better whip, but an engineer with mimetism that I've used to kill things late game. People can be surprised at how good just having mimetism on a combi rifle model can actually be. So this guy can actually fight a bit, and of course he can shoot quite well with Ballistic Skill 12 standard Pano as well. So he's, yeah, it's a nice addition, reasonably-ish costed. I mean, it's a bit of bloat, but the linkable ability more than makes up for that. So there you go. Mulebots, nothing special. You might take the Evo for the previously mentioned reason of doing coordinated hacks. Other than that, nothing special here. You've got AVA2. If you really need extra orders, then you could grab a couple of the 8.1s. Also, it's your other baggage. I think it's your only baggage option. So if you do want baggage for those kind of missions, then there you go. I'm going to swing the list over here. There we go. So we've got Noken. Yeah, these guys are fantastic. Another unique unit to this faction. I think these guys are brilliant in pretty much every way, apart from the fact that they're not linkable. But it doesn't matter, because other things that are really good in this faction are linkable, that do a similar job. But on their own, I totally, starting from the top, wouldn't mind taking a Noken Spitfire. It reminds me a lot of the Noct for Spitfire, which is just a gross unit to have to come up against, because those negative mods, and if you're good with your range bands, you can put them at a negative 12. Just catching those combi rifle models just out of bad range, but you're still in good range. It's really, really good. And the very problem is, unlike the Noct for Spitfire, it's not hidden deployment. So the cool thing about those is that, you know, they don't know, they can never see it coming. But with this guy, yeah, you'll know he's there, but he's still really hard to deal with. And putting one in suppressive fire in the right spot after you've killed a few things can just be a nail in the coffin for your opponent never being able to hit this guy, or just, you know, it can be really decisive, just having those two things. The only reason why I might not take him is because the Bulleteer exists, and the Bulleteer is basically this unit minus the forward deployment. Yeah, it's not as tough with the, you know, BTS 3 and Armor 2 sort of thing. In fact, let me just check. I can't remember if they're BTS 3. Yes, they are. So literally, it's just the Armor 2. And the fact that you could put assisted fire on the Bulleteer means that it may be a better, cheaper option if you just want the combination of a decent shooter plus ODD. But I still quite like this unit anyway, despite the fact that there are other things that are good at it in this faction. The killer hacking device, the hacking device basic one is good. Oh, I didn't realize this. They have a killer hacking device as well. So maybe it's kind of vying for a spot over the previously mentioned Locust unit, but as the killer hacking device. But anyway, yes, hacking devices. As hacking devices go, there is a cheaper one, obviously, Fusilier. But if this model plays into your strategy a bit better with its positioning, then you could put your hacking device further up. I'm not sure why you would, though. I think Bulleteers are repeaters. Yes, they are. So you wouldn't need to put them next to that. And let me just check the Peacemakers. Because I think Peacemakers are repeaters as well. Yes, they are. So maybe you wouldn't want to take that then, now that I think about it. Because I was just thinking the only reason you take it is so that you could get it next to one of your remotes as it moves up the field, but you actually wouldn't need to do that. So maybe give that one a miss. If you just want the hacker, you should probably take the killer hacking device, in which case that's totally fine. He's got two great range bands, both short and medium range band covered. With the forward deployment means that he can get into range with both of those, so that's pretty good. As a specialist, it's all right. If you just want the if you want a mine layer, which you might need because this faction has a lot of good long-range defensive options, but not a lot of really good short-range ones, other than the Peacemaker with its flamers and maybe the Vargas unit we'll talk about again in a minute, but they're expensive. So if you just want some mines, this is one way of getting some mines. It's just a shame it isn't a specialist as well, but most profiles like this aren't. So that's not too much of a drawback. Forward Observer Boarding Shotgun, I like this one a lot. I think it provides a couple of really annoying things with its ODD. It goes out and does missions, goes out and kills midfield units with the boarding shotgun, and then it could stand there and be the world's most annoying ARO piece with the Panzerpals for a couple of shots, especially if you catch a couple of units where they've got to move out, and they're not going to be in cover when they move out, and then they won't be able to deal with this guy with the Panzerfaust, so that's really good. I think that's a nice addition. The multi-spectral visor boarding shotgun is a weird one. It's a good anti-midfield hunter sort of unit, It's good for hunting enemy camo models where you've got your ODD, so you're going to be putting them at negative mods, and then you reduce their negative mod or eliminate it with the MSV1. So he's a bit of a midfield hunter, but to be honest, if you're in good range with a boarding shotgun, that generally mitigates their negative mods anyway. So I'm not sure if you would take this one instead of the boarding shotgun Panzerfaust. You might as well take that for the extra point. Okay, but other than that, Noken, really good. And you can sort of do that midfield bunker thing that I quite like doing in other factions, where you've got forward deployment here, and then Lankai's forward deployment, and locus of infiltration, and you can build yourself little bunkers midfield with one of these with mines and a specialist, and so they're a little bit further up the field, which I really like to sort of secure an area. It's quite good. Orc troops. So this is a tough one to talk about, because they are 50% of these profiles are fantastic, and the other 50% are, orc troops. They're kind of just meh and not really worth taking. So a lot of the combi rifle ones are just too expensive for what they are. I'd rather take other units that had some kind of, skills that make them win firefights. I mean, obviously, ballistic skill 14 makes you win a firefight anyway, but then you're winning it with a combi rifle, not great. So ignore mostly a lot of the combi rifle ones. Again, I would never take this assault hacking device here, because I think it's just too expensive, and you can take ones that start further up the field in this faction and so on and so forth. So I just don't think it's really worth it. The multi-rifles are good, but again, I think they're very expensive for what you're getting. A multi-rifle guy that basically just has the armor and the wounds going for him. No deployment abilities or anything like that. But not everything can't have everything. And as I said earlier, you can make pretty decent three-man teams with these, actually making a core of Fusiliers, using a Fusilier to make it cheaper, instead of the Vargas, where you've got, two Fusiliers, or a Fusilier and an Infirmera, with one of these guys moving up the field instead of using it as a defensive core. And that's totally legitimate, especially when you've got Nis Harrys and whatever, if you want to use them for defensive options. So, you might use multi-rifle Timbot and multi-rifle profiles, but it only gets interesting later on. So if you want a tough lieutenant, this is your way to get it, but to be honest, it may be easier to just hide a Fusilier somewhere than it is to have this guy, huge guy, taking up all those points, being tough but not that tough in the grand scheme of things, sitting at the back, being a lieutenant. And the problem is, again, no chain of command in this faction, so you're using an HMG lieutenant without being able to use the benefit of that lieutenant order, without painting a target on it. It's just not going to work for me. I quite like the multi-rifle duo, just because of the wildcard options, but a lot of other things have duo here. So if you just wanted to build a duo with a wildcard, there are probably more efficient ways of doing it. Then we get to the Feuerback. The Feuerback is fantastic. This is for me, one of my two go-to aero defensive roadblock pieces, where you just sit there and it's hard to move, and it's high armor, and it's annoying, and it shoots really well. Putting this in the 5-man core, ballistic skill 17 with its burst 2, choosing explosive rounds, is going to put most things in their place. There's not a lot you can choose in the game that will just straight out and out win a firefight with this without imposing serious negative mods, and even then you might still lose. It's a really, really good aero piece, so that is a piece that you'd see a lot, and you might see a lot when I do our list building video. The shotgun Timbot deflector, strange that it costs 0.5 SWC. I'm really not sure why that is. I don't know. I mean, Yu Jing, I don't think deflectors usually cost the 0.5 SWC, but I mean, they might. A lot of them are Harry's profile, so I have no idea. It's hard to tell what's causing the points cost there, but it's just odd that this is a boarding shotgun that costs that, but, a little strange. But if you really want that deflector in your link team to protect it, then fair enough. If you're a local meta, people are doing a lot of hacking and they're shutting you down quite a lot, then you might just really need this, in which case, fair enough. So you've got the new profiles here, and this is the interesting one. So you've got the Harry's ones, which are cool. The Climbing Plus is just brilliant on models like this. I can see why they don't all have good guns, because if they did, Climbing Plus on HMG and stuff is just ridiculous being able to just get those angles or climb up those buildings and start raining down fire. So I can see why they've sort of handicapped them with multi-rifles for the range. But it's still a really good unit. It's hard to deal with units that have climbing plus. And as a core to these first two profiles, using them as the core unit to build around is okay. It's strange. They're still very expensive, and orcs just aren't a lot of fun. And if you're doing the Harry's team, I'd still rather have the Hospitaller Knights, who are cheaper and fight just as well and have the close combat potential. So it's an odd one. I'd like a lot of feedback. I need time to think about this really, because I'm going to do a list building video, and then I'll really delve into what I can do with these. But for the time being, I'm not sure they're going to show up a lot. So we'll see when we get to that video if I ended up using them or not. Please let me know in the comments, by the way. I'd love to know what you would do with these, because I'm still not entirely sure. Peacemaker Armbots. Peacemaker's brilliant. Anyone that has used any of these units that have an attached flamer knows how horrible it is to come around the corner against your opponent, and they've got choices between dodging and whether they shoot back, and then they eat the flamer for free and stuff. And then with the speed, it's just an incredible attacking piece that works really well. So I prefer, if you're going to take the shotgun and you want a fast, heavy shotgun, you really should take this one over the Bulletier version. Even though the Bulletier has the ODD, the combination of the Augsbot flamer and the heavy shotgun is more effective for just killing stuff. And a lot of the time they're going to have to dodge anyway, because they don't want to risk eating a heavy flamer for free, or not having a face-to-face roll versus one of these two. So they often always dodge, which keeps your armbot alive, and then they either get hit by one of the two, or they just get, if they pass the dodge, they get hit again. So it's really good. The Spitfire doesn't make any sense to me, because the Spitfire is going to be at a range where the Augsbot isn't really doing anything, other than the fact that they're still good for defending on deployment zone, which I just forgot to mention as well. This faction needs stuff to defend close range. So again, this is your option. Covering the angle with the heavy flamer and the heavy shotgun is great. And the second profile does that with the heavy flamer, but when you're using the Spitfire aggressively, the Augsbot's really just tagging along and not really doing anything at that range. So still not sure why you would take this Spitfire for that duty when you have the Bulletier that does it so much better. So yeah, the top profile is definitely useful, but the second one not so much in my opinion. Sierra Dronebot, obviously this is brilliant. Your standard TR bot, buff it, get bonuses. I've made a couple of lists so far, more than a couple actually, but yeah, in a few lists I ended up with 5 SWC, not being able to fit another big gun in, simply because a lot of them cost 1.5 or 2 SWC. So if you find yourself 1 SWC left, this is a brilliant option. You've got another defensive / attacking piece, so you should take it. Svalarheima Nisses are amazing, and this is the thing everyone was excited about, because they wanted to see the linkable options for this faction, and they are good. They're not as good as the Kamau in Varuna. I finally remember the name, the Kamau in Varuna, but if they were, then they would be the same. And the two factions, that's the big draw of Varuna, is that you get to do all the horrible things with Kamau snipers and stuff like that, and HMGs. But you kind of do get to do the same thing here, you just don't get to do it as cheaply. Because the Nisses do have the Fireteam Core and Fireteam Harris option. It's brilliant that they have it natively on their profile. So any of these profiles can be your Harry's guy, and then you can plug in wildcards, so on and so forth, to any of those stuff. They're all just great. These are all really, really good profiles. The hacking device might get beat out by other hacking device profiles. You probably just do it cheaper. But the paramedic is good because with the restriction on what you can link with these guys, you can't put an infirmary with them. So if you're using the HMG to run up the table, unfortunately, your best bet for picking him up might be another NIS paramedic standing directly behind him, which is not great. He'll do it on 9s, but it's better than nothing. And you're moving a specialist up there as well. But if you can plug in a wild card that's cheaper, I probably would. I think Richard Quinn is probably better, even though he's a bit boring, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he's still good if you want a specialist, and to make this link team cheaper, you can do that. It's the same with the core as well. If you can, use the machinist option and use Richard Quinn to make the core of these guys cheaper if you really want that ballistic skill 16 Kamau-esque sniper in a Link team. But again, this faction can do it. They just, it costs them a bit more. But these guys have been around for a while, so it's hard to say anything new about them, other than the fact that obviously a ballistic skill 13, mimetism, MSV2, HMG in the Link team is fantastic, whether it's in a Harry's or whether it's not. They remind me, I've been playing a lot of Toha recently, and obviously they remind me a lot of the Sukiel. The Sukiel commandos, they're just fantastic. And ballistic skill 13 is high enough when you're imposing negative mods on your opponent. You end up winning most face-to-face rolls anyway, so you don't really need the extra ballistic skill bonus from a 5-man team. Usually the 3-man is just enough to get the job done. But other than that, yeah, the lieutenant costing 1 SWC is a bit odd, but I can see why it might. Only because they wanted to reduce the number of lieutenant options, I think, that you could take in this faction, and force you to for that to be a bit of a weakness of this faction, and for you have to take either an obvious Fusilier or something like that. So I can see why it is. It's just a shame. It would have been nice to have just had this be a 0 cost lieutenant, but it would have been a bit expensive. So there you go. Obviously, we're going to talk about this in depth when we do the list building video. So yeah, we'll get onto that soon. So Trauma Doc, Standard Doctor, probably not much to say about that. We all know what they do. Whip 12 because Pano. Guns don't kill people. Pano Docs kill people. So Troll Hunter Gunnar Lundmark. Okay, so this character is a lot of fun, and it's annoying that he's not... okay, so he needs no winding cap, in my opinion, and he would be just fine. But if he did have that, well, I still don't think he would be too good if he had that, because as it stands, this model is a lot of points to put into a model. He does a lot of things, but is quite squishy, because he's 1 wound armor 3. A lot of things in the game have shock, and if he goes dogged, he's dying anyway at the end of the turn. He attacks really well, but not so well that you'd want to risk, some firefights with him because he's dogged. You may end up not shooting with him and choosing another member of, say, the Link, because he's a wild card, to shoot with, just so that you don't risk taking a hit. Obviously, you could just not go dogging and go unconscious and have someone pick you up. But again, it's a bit of a liability using him that aggressively. And I think if he was no incapacitation, he would be a little bit more reliable for that. Obviously, shock is going to kill him outright, but that would work on no wind incap. But it would just give him that little bit of more staying power. Because outside of that, his stats are fantastic, and he's a lot of fun to use. He's got a trench hammer, and who doesn't love trench hammers? And the model's fantastic. I think the model's great. The Natural Born Warrior is brilliant as well. And Berserk is brilliant. Just all of these things are great. He's just very expensive for a model that's generally going to trade a lot of the time, especially with some of those stats. Berserk is a trading ability most of the time, and it usually erases the target straight away. So if they hit back and he fails his armor save, then he has to go dogged or unconscious. And it's going to be trading. He's going to be trading an awful lot, but he does cover so many bases. And being a specialist and being a wild card, I can totally understand why you take him. And he's a lot of fun to use. It just could be a bit of a liability. I have to keep comparing him to other characters, and I have to use Hippolyta as an example, because if you look at that stat line, regular impetuous, not frenzy, same points cost, regular impetuous, the Eclipse Grenades. Yes, she's not a specialist, but she just does that one job of shooting and close combating and being generally terrifying a little bit better than this guy. And she has some staying power, and the smoke dodges and things like that mean that you really get the points value out of her. Whereas I'm not sure you're going to get the points value out of this guy every time, but it's still going to be fun to use and still going to be worth taking. So yeah, he's awesome. Can't wait to get him and paint him. It's going to be brilliant. So the last major profile we have to talk about, because the other one is a Warcore, I don't need to talk about that. It's nothing special here. So we're going to talk about the Vargas. So Vargas are cool. They're, again, a bit like, I believe, the Rodox. I think it's the Rodox from Morats that do the super jump. And they kind of remind me a lot of those. They've got Fire Team Core and Harry's basic on the profile, which I really like. And these are just another option. And Albedo is your way of dealing with enemy units when you don't really have access to white noise. So if you really want something that will kill the enemy sniper with mimetism and MSV2 and all that stuff, then these are one of your units to do that. And they do it quite cost effectively as well. They don't have 2 wounds, but they're still tougher than your average guy. They've got decent ballistic skill, decent willpower for Pano. Super jump gives them the option to get anywhere they want to go. I know 4-2 is a bit odd with super jump, but it clears most buildings quite fun, without any real problems. And it allows them, a little bit more flexibility, and they can still do jump shots if they need to catch something out of cover or whatever that your opponent didn't expect that angle. So that's really good. I think they're good all around. I think they're reasonably priced for what they do. This sensor option here is really good because it's one of only 2, I believe, sensors in the faction, and I actually quite like using this as your core base. Running again, or a Harry's base, so that you add all of these range bands to the Harry straight away with your EM weapon, your flamer weapon, your combi rifle, and a sensor. So you add all of that utility to your Harry's team, and then you start plugging in wild cards like a Knight of Justice or something, which would really, be really good. And then your Infirmer is your specialist, which you're probably going to see me do a lot as a Vargas, Harry's, Knight of Justice, and then your Infirmer is a really solid 3-man team that I quite like, covering all of those range bands, specialists, close combat, shooting, just does everything really well. So that's probably what you're going to see from me in the list building session. The K1 Marksman Rifle is brilliant for shooting out enemy snipers without albedo, so that might be your option. And he's a mine layer, totally cool, totally decent option for taking. It's just a shame that he doesn't have any negative mods himself, unless you're shooting it against MSV2 models, of course, without albedo. But he's still really good. I think he's brilliant. He's a really good model. Overall, K1 Marksman is good. It gives you really good armor busting potential. He can shoot very well with it. It's totally legit. Biome immunity is brilliant. So if he takes a bad ARO, it's unlikely to kill him outright, because, it's shock or something like that, unless you picked your fight badly and you went up against DA or explosive or something. So you can always revive him, carry on shooting, and he's likely to just kill that target. So he's pretty good. Forward Observer is another decent specialist, so it's good. Just plug it into the link team. Again, covers the range bands, got mines, got flamethrower, really good. And then you've got the heavy rocket launcher for your jump quake style rocket jumping missiles and or ARO piece, although there are tougher ARO pieces in this faction, but 25 points is a bargain. So if you do want to take this guy just for the ARO piece, you could take like 4 of them, do like two of these guys. One of them is your Harry's profile, right? And the heavy rocket launcher. Have your Knight of Justice standing out on the side. Have the heavy rocket launcher as a ARO piece, and then when it goes down, you just link those 3 up with your Vargas, your Infirmary, your Knight of Justice, and then carry them up the table, and you got your annoying ARO piece. Or you can just pick them up and carry on using them, shooting. So really good. So that is all the profiles finished, and I'm really excited to do a list building session with you guys after this and the next video, because I think this is a really interesting faction and they can be really cool. Obviously they just do the shooty thing because that's what Pano do, but I think they have some really nice fluffy units, some really nice interesting units, and some stuff you can do with them that I think could be quite crushing and fun to play with. So I will share those with you in the next video, but for now, thank you for watching. My name is Seb.k. I always enjoy doing these. If you want to have a look at some of the other Tabletop Republic videos, we've got stuff covering card games, board games, and all kinds of stuff. And obviously like and subscribe. But for now, that is me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.